I'm Harry Traynor from CPS. I'm an AI Solutions Architect. I might have met some of you before. I do a lot of customer-facing interactions, but hopefully today I'm going to take you through what feels like just describing my day job sometimes, which is from AI curiosity to real business value. And that's basically how to discover high-impact use cases. That's a lot of what I do. Obviously, being an architect, it is the technical role, but it's also the discovery role as well. So I'm really interested to talk to you about this, and please flood the questions in the chat. I'm joined by Ollie as well, who's a sales lead in CPS as well, who hopefully will be triaging some of those questions. If there's anything that's obviously reserved for me, I can hopefully answer those as I go, but Ollie, yeah, feel free to call them out as needed too. Just to kind of kick off with what we're going to cover, there's lots of things in here. Hopefully I'm going to take you through in a somewhat methodical way so you understand from start to finish pretty much what that customer journey looks like for us, but also what it will look like for you as well internally when it comes to you finding our use cases. And the first thing really is what is actually a use case, and it's that kind of where should we start kind of energy. It's often the biggest question I get asked when we've got excited customers wanting to use AI. It's kind of like what are some of the things we should be doing? Then we'll talk about discovery techniques. This is probably where most of my time gets spent, of having really long calls with lots of SMEs, lots of leaders, lots of different people from an organization, and actually understanding people. But it's that, how do you do good discovery? Then we'll look at what I call the complexity profiler. It's like saying, great, we've collected all this stuff, but now how do we actually start looking at the complexity? How do we start grading this? Kind of like your homework of what's good, what's bad, what should we start working on, what shouldn't we, maybe just yet. And then we'll go into the prioritization and road mapping piece, obviously at the end with Q&A, with a little bit of wrap up. But yeah, without further ado, let me get into it. So the first thing I think is always interesting to talk about are some of the common themes we see, at least, where some customers will turn around and go, "Oh, Harry, we've got 10 licenses, 1,000 licenses to Copilot or to X, to a product." And then it's kind of like, cool, now we want to just fit a solution into that. We want to utilize it instantly. And it's a good way of doing it, but at the same time, it's thinking about what the clear problem is first. Having the tech is great, but then it's usually the leaders will turn around and go, okay, what's the ROI? You've asked for this budget of X licenses, but now how do you show me that this is actually giving impact to our end users, to our business, whatever that is, and it's making sure that you join those dots together. We then look at what is tech over outcomes. I think this theme has been such a big one throughout at least my consultancy career, around this idea that sometimes we focus a little bit too much on the tech, especially when it comes to AI hype. A lot of what my job I see is going into customers and being like, okay, cool, great, we've got the excitement. That is everything that I need to make a successful project. But now let's focus on where the value actually lies. Let's find some really good solutions and not trying to retrofit it the other way around. It's a really important approach to take when you're trying to understand where should we start. Finally, this is, again, such a valuable piece of information around pilots. I think with AI, there is this kind of underlying idea of, okay, where do these actually give us return on investment, return on our people, return on whatever it is? But, okay, we've built a pilot. Is it just going to be dead in the water afterwards? Have we continued that momentum? And very much for me, pilots are great. They showcase that ROI if you have picked the right solutions, the right use cases to actually build. But then how do you take that even further? How do you make sure in that BAU phase that you keep that momentum going, that you keep the teams, the people, whoever the stakeholders are for this, excited for your product, because you're actually delivering that real value within it as well. And there's all sorts of things, around making these things scalable, and pilots are a great way of starting that. They can be really small, they can be a lot larger. We do all sorts of sizes of pilots, but it's definitely something for you to think about. And the other one, for me at least, is really this idea of, I guess, abstract thinking. Often there are some almost cliche examples of how to use AI, and I'm not saying don't do them. They are usually a great place to get that excitement rolling, to get people into the mix of what actually is AI? How does that impact my job? How can it help me? How can it save me time? All those sorts of things. But it's really thinking about as well the abstract stuff, the stuff that people might not have thought about. And that I think is where discovery is really amazing. You just have conversations with people about, okay, what's your day job? What do you do? What works really well? What's a pain point in that? What sorts of systems you interact with? And me sitting there listening to all these things is going, oh, okay, yep, that's interesting. That's a lot of data. That could be over here. You could automate that. It's really starting to think about people's jobs in very interesting ways and the tasks that we have to do, and not just the obvious ones. The obvious ones lead to quick wins, but there are some other really kind of gold nuggets hidden away that can help people and have a high impact as a result of that. So it's thinking about all these different vectors, all these different angles to take when it comes to where should you actually start. And it really depends on your organization, but yeah. And an interesting concept that you then start thinking about is, okay, if we're maybe starting to do some discovery, we're starting to look at pilots of stuff, or getting together a group of SMEs that could maybe help with the momentum of this. It's then thinking about, okay, but what does actual good look like? What are we actually targeting here? What are we looking to do? And often for me, it's understanding end to end a process, a set of people, things, teams, all those sorts of things end to end, so that I can really understand everything about it. And that's super, super, super important so that you can actually build solutions that scale in the future. I'll talk more about that stuff later, but to me, it's one of the most important things. I'm a very abstract thinker, and it just really helps me get into the character of what this team is, what they're doing, what the problem is, and what hopefully a use case could be around that. Another huge piece as well is often really challenging when you actually ask someone, how long does this thing take you? What's the value if we could automate this? Is there a quality improvement? Is it your cognitive ability of not having to think about 14 different things all at the same time? Is it just a direct impact to the business of, I've saved XYZ cost? There's all sorts of different nuances that you should really think about when it comes to, okay, great, we found the use case, but what are we actually mapping that to? What is the outcome here that we can measure? Again, it's really easy to say certain things, oh, it will improve quality, but define what quality means in that scenario. What are you actually trying to work towards? How do you actually know a proof of concept is proven? You've proved the concept if you haven't set any key metrics that are measurable from the before, from the after. And again, lots of ways of doing that, but it's very much the challenge of making these things successful. And of course, there is very much a kind of the choosing the tool. It's thinking about the technical perspective. Often that comes last to some degree. You've mapped those first two things, you've understood the process, you're then kind of thinking about the business value or the person value within that. And then finally, pardon me, what tools are then actually going to be mapped into that? Sometimes it's good to show people what good looks like with the tools, show an agent that does X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, it should usually be the last task that you do once you've solidified the first two. Cool. I think this is probably my number one question. Once people are starting to mature and organizations are starting to mature with the whole piece around collecting use cases, um, it's a really interesting one. There are lots of ways of doing it. Some of the most successful things I think I've seen is very much champions, having a network of people that are either interested in the tech, interested in the process or the people, and letting them go wild with the whole, okay, find use cases. There's more conversational pieces around that. Again, depends on the size of your organization. Sometimes it's just communities, having a little Viva Engage community that you've set up that is collecting those sorts of things, getting people talking, posting updates about, oh, XYZ is now possible in Copilot Studio. Great. How do you get people excited about this and submitting their use cases to you? I will talk about a more scaled approach in a second, but I want to really show you as well what I call the 5 hidden dimensions of collecting use cases. I'm sure you could come up with many more dimensions. It's just these are usually the most common that we should be tracking and should be understanding. Again, this can be in conversation, it could be in a kind of Microsoft form element. There's all sorts of ways of actually extracting these bits of information, but what do they mean? So the number one, information landscape, is really that first question. It's usually the one that trips up people the most. Okay, great, you've got an idea. How accessible is your data? Is it structured? Is it actually centralized? Has it got the right permissions on it? Is this going to lots of people again? So you need to pay more attention to that. Does it deal with sensitive information? There's so many weird and wonderful nuanced questions that you can ask here that often people will go, "Ooh, yeah, we're probably not ready for that. Actually, we should probably spend a little bit more time, because if you've got bad data, the agent is going to reason over that. If you've got lots of gaps in your data, again, the agent isn't necessarily going to know what to talk about. And if your agent is getting escalated all the time because it's not got the right information, it's not good. So we need to catch that at the first point that we can. And it's not saying when you catch these, it's not saying we can't do a use case. It's just a really good way of keeping your end users in the loop and saying, great, sounds like an amazing use case. Sounds like there's lots of return on value there. But you need to go away and do these things from a due diligence perspective before we can push on. Then we think about pattern strength. This is basically like saying, what's your process? Is your process consistent? Often, I'll come in and it's, okay, could you tell me about your SOPs? Could you tell me about how you do this end to end? And there's a lot of hums, there's a lot of ha's on the call. Sometimes people even then have disagreements in the call of, oh no, I thought we were doing it this way. And it's, again, it's not an underlying problem in the grand scheme of things. It's just you need to document some of those things. The more complicated an agent gets, the more complicated a solution gets. You need to make sure you have riveted that down and really understood what is the agent going to be doing. Because it wouldn't make sense to make an agent do all these different things in a process in different ways. Because again, you're reducing quality of the outcome as a result of that, usually. Next two are kind of hand in hand, which is blast radius and stake weight. Blast radius is kind of like saying how many different people, systems, or different dependencies really does this product touch, so the blast radius. But then the stake weight is, okay, if something did go wrong, how bad is that going to be? And again, it's a really simple question of, okay, if we're building an HR agent, okay, the blast radius is actually fairly minimal because it's only touching a knowledge base, great, but actually the stake weight is fairly high, because if the HR agent advises something incorrectly, that's really not good, because we could be dealing with thousands of people asking questions daily, and great, we've reduced the amount of emails we're receiving, but if we're giving them bad knowledge, that's actually a really high impact stake weight. So we would maybe want to spend more time on XYZ in the solution to prevent that, to guardrail that and make it better in that scalability perspective. Finally, we then talk about momentum signal. This is usually, I'd say, the most interesting one that does catch people out, catches organizations out. Of the first four are relatively straightforward once you've got a good understanding and you facilitate those calls, whatever it is. But it's thinking about how much energy have we got behind this product, this idea, this solution, this use case. Have we actually got ownership behind it? Have we got people that are going to drive the change management piece of, cool, we've built a really great agent, but then who's going to adopt it? Who's using it? Is it great? Is it bad? Do we need to refine stuff? All those sorts of things are really, really, really important to think about in that bigger picture. An interesting thing we've actually been experimenting with, one of my own kind of little projects within CPS, is this idea of, I'm sure you've seen the kind of personality tests and all those sorts of fun things that you can do. Of course, I'm blue, I'm very logic driven, but we thought, could you do the exact same thing when it comes to profiling a use case, understanding a use case in a way, you can see some of the previews there of different people would approach this task in different ways. One being you strongly disagree, four being you strongly agree. And again, you can guide people through in a very scaled approach of what's your use case, describe it in a high level perspective. Now go through some predefined questions so that we can create a profile, create a chart that's almost like recommendations. If you've answered these honestly, is your data great? Is your adoption great? Are you going to have problems with cost, whatever it is? They're all just really interesting ways of profiling your different use cases. And then you think about, great, I've collected all these use cases. We've got all the nuance out of people, and we're starting to see some value. We think, how do we now choose which ones to do? And again, there's always going to be budget constraints. There's the priorities of what your organization has, the kind of what your culture wants as well, and what you actually want to work on. But for me, again, it's putting it into this little matrix of prioritization versus complexity. The first block, being easy experiments, is a really fun one, I think, where you've got a low complexity from a tech perspective and low impact from a if it goes wrong, are we going to break a ton of different things? Usually is a great place as well for your makers, for your people wanting to learn, for your SMEs, all those sorts of people to have an experiment, to have a play with these different use cases. Um, you've then got quick wins. Quick wins are it's weirdly high impact and low complexity. Usually they're really good places to start POCs of rolling out something again, like the HR agents, corporate services, all those sorts of different things. Have lots of great knowledge behind them, but you could surface that as a quick win through an agent. We're seeing lots of value there and lots of great kind of customer wins very quickly with, again, minimal effort in the grand scheme of things. Strategic bets is always the most interesting box of all of them. High impact and high complexity. They're great, obviously, solutions to work on because hopefully they, as a result, give you higher ROI as a result of it or make someone's life easier in essence. But again, planning them out, they're going to be bigger. They're going to obviously cost you more and they're going to be part of that bigger, probably organizational change in the grand scheme of things. And of course, deprioritize. I'm not saying you shouldn't do these sorts of use cases. It's very much why have you put them into that box? So, okay, it's high complexity, but it's lower impact. Is that just because maybe the data's not ready, the people aren't ready, or the process isn't ready? And once you actually understand that a bit more, you might actually put that into an easy experiment box. Or it might be a quick win again if you can understand actually this wasn't as complicated as we thought because we fixed some of the problems here. So yeah, never get rid of any of your use cases. It's just a case of when should you do them and how should you do them is the big picture. And finally, just conscious of time, I'll just run through what I call like the discovery conversation. It's very much how I would how I would work a discovery call, which is you tell me. I do not want to be doing most of the talking in these sorts of calls, but it's very much a time for someone almost to treat me like a therapist and tell me all of their woes, the processes that aren't working, the pain points, the people. And at the end of the day, I'm listening. I'm probably transcribing everything as well with some AI friends and understanding. Basically, I'm poking with all sorts of different questions. Then you move into walking the logic. This is the one that's most interesting for me is I'm essentially trying to learn what you do and how you do it. Again, it's the kind of BA approach to understanding and knowledge, but it's the mapping your flow, mapping from start to finish what you are trying to achieve. If it doesn't make sense to you, it's definitely not going to make sense to me. And it's definitely going to make it a lot harder when it comes to mapping that into an actual solution itself. I need to understand every possible in and out of your process, what the discussion points are, all sorts of things like that. The exceptions, what's good, what's bad. There's so many questions you can ask in that section. Scenario testing, this is the one where I have to be definitely a little bit rude on the call where I'm like, okay, but what if? What if this broke? What if that happened? How would you deal with this? What if someone was off sick? Would the process happen the same way? What if I was a brand new employee day one? How would I learn this process? What would I do? And again, you understand people, you understand the gaps in the process, and sometimes it's perfection. It's beautiful. They've documented everything. But a lot of the time, again, it's about understanding that nuance. Sometimes I feel these conversations do spark people then sitting down and going, oh yeah, we should probably document that. We haven't really defined that yet, even for the human equivalent of doing that process. Maybe we should look at that in a little bit more detail. Again, put the project on pause, let that process happen, and you've now made this a much easier solution to build in the long scheme. And then finally, extract the expertise. This is where I have to ask a million and one questions about your decision processes. Sometimes, depending on the solution, it's really easy to get that. I know a lot of the law firms we work with, again, there is so much nuance because it is legal related solutions. There's so much nuance about how they do things, why they do things, the text they can use, the response, all that sort of stuff. There's so much nuance to that. I then have to spend a lot more extra time actually extracting all of that expertise from people. So up until this point, you've extracted all this information, you've got use cases, maybe you've started prioritizing them, you've maybe done some discovery calls to deep dive into them, and now you're thinking, which solution do I actually use for this? And this is very much a really interesting conversation. Even in my personal life, people ask me, "Oh, Harry, could I build an agent for that?" And I'm like, "You could, but you probably shouldn't." Sometimes it's thinking about Microsoft Copilot, 365 Copilot can do so many awesome things for you, and there are so many different processes from a personal and from a kind of team perspective that it can just fix straight away. It's a very good product. But then when you start thinking about, "Ooh, we want to scale this up. There's a lot of people involved here. There's sensitive information, or we need this to be really governed, or we need it to be autonomous. It needs to sit in an email account." All those sorts of things are in my head of, "Ooh, that's a really good place to actually do a proper full-blown AI agent in something like Copilot Studio, the full version." And it's really targeted for all those sorts of things. And as you can see on the slide there, this definitely doesn't do it justice of how many things it can do, but you can even get into the realms of Azure Foundry as well to help those really complicated solutions that you have. So final few slides, and before I hopefully have a few minutes left for questions, is very much what we've learnt. I have done a fair few agents now, very big, very small, all sorts of different customers, and there's lots of fun things that I've always learned from them. I think the first one is human in the loop, and this isn't always the most obvious thing. Sometimes it is escalation in the event that I can't answer a question as the agent. What do? Raise that to human. Great. In the event that a process is fully autonomous, how do you do human in the loop there? Is it, again, you ping for a Teams approval of an item that wasn't super confident? Is it that you have an audit trail that has a dashboard in front of it that allows you to understand what's the success rate of the agent? What was it doing in XYZ situation? Was it positive? Was it negative? All those sorts of things are indicators about how you understand what the end result is, but doing it in a protected, guardrailed manner. Probably, I'd say, I mean, I love all of these, but start modular and scale later is probably one of my most important ones. If you're doing proof of concepts, if you're trying to show people what amazing looks like when it comes to AI, think about being modular. What's the MVP? What's the POC here that is very much proving this thing works? It was able to do X, Y, Z. It was able to do it at a high quality, but it's not super, error prone, error guarded, should I say, all those sorts of things. But it's very much about proving that value. But phase two, we then add those things. Phase three, because we made it modular, we can now bolt on another agent, bolt on another system, design, functionality, whatever it is, that allows it to scale in a much more sensible manner. And again, that's where architecture is really important about mapping your scenarios. Two paths for every user. This is always a fun one. You're always going to get expert users using your applications. I think an interesting one was lessons learned collection that I think this one stemmed from, where you want someone to be guided through collecting a good lesson, but then also you want the other person that maybe has already done all of that writing up because it's their day job. You just want them to be able to submit all the answers and the agent goes away and does that stuff for you. It's designing for different types of users that work with your systems. Prioritize fail-safes. Often you'll see people design agents that work amazingly in the good path, the path that is perfection, when all of the answers are perfectly scripted and they just work. Great, you've made an agent. What humans will inevitably do, though, is break things, and that's where you have the bad path. Understanding what if a user says something completely out of context, says something that's not in the scope of the agent. How do you deal with that in the big picture? Change management, always think about your people, always think about how you're going to adopt these tools. And then finally, context is everything. Prompt engineering used to be a big thing, and it still is a huge part of building an agent. But I think actually context engineering is the most complicated part, which is pulling in the knowledge, pulling in the context that makes what the agent does high quality and actually specific to your organization or specific to your use case. That's really where the value is coming from, not necessarily just the prompting at the end of the day. This is my last slide, I promise. Then I'll have hopefully a few minutes for questions, but very much the real opportunities that we've seen and the stuff that I've worked on with the team is document processing. This can mean all sorts of things. I think we've done CV sifting, all that sort of stuff, agenda building. So again, all involving documents, all the kind of the idea of understanding those documents as well in that format. Customer and staff Q&A. It's probably the kind of quick wins, as I mentioned, where you've got a bunch of different corporate services that have all these documents, even the kind of the SHIA side of things, so health and safety. There's so many things that are documented already. Why not surface that through an agent for that quick win that is people having quick answers for things that are important, in essence? Decision support, this means all sorts of things. To me, decision support, we often work with some more senior people within organizations that their resource, their time is, very much sought after, and they have to protect that. So is it you've got an inbox triage system? Is it that you've got something that is, again, speeding up a process for them? There's so many different nuances about how you can do that, and again, what the value is. But finally, process orchestration. Very much the most complicated part of all. We've done a lot with kind of manufacturing law firms, some kind of F1 teams around what is taking a complicated process where it maybe has lots of different outcomes and being able to design that into an agent. But very conscious of time. I warned you, I could talk about this for too long. I'll just leave up the last slide here, which is obviously if you want to reach out, if anything has resonated with you in this session, please do feel free to book in a call. But yeah, I'm going to open up the chat and see what has been going through.
I think for the moment we're actually quite short on questions, but if anyone does have any questions kind of currently outstanding, by all means feel free to, we've got a chat and a Q&A function, so feel free to add into there and we'll answer. Well, I say we, Harry will answer appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to hear, Adele, though. It's always different per organization, how you work, the types of people you've got. But hopefully I've given you some ideas of where to start and yeah, what you can start looking through. Cool, thank you, Stuart. Oh, has that Q&A come through? High sensitive data goes into an AI. Using AI for inbox triage seems high risk. Will there be GDPR concerns? Yeah, Stephen, it's something we definitely work with. I think, at least from Microsoft's priority, making those things possible is important. There is an argument of sitting down and saying Copilot can do it, Copilot can deal with certain types of information, but there should be extreme guardrails around that. We do see some customers just saying outright, no, don't let this solution touch this just yet because we need to mature that. And it's the case of run a bunch of other POCs, run a bunch of other projects, collect your lessons, mature your governance and security around your data as well, and that then tees you up nicely as an organization to make an informed decision. Should we actually be building this use case, or is it actually something that we don't think AI should be touching just yet? So it's never a yes no to those sorts of things, but it is very much just understanding as much as you can about what it is you're working with. But hopefully that answers your question. Awesome. Thank you very much for the good feedback.
I'll say conscious of time. I guess that's probably everything on the slides for the moment. If anyone has any questions outstanding, by all means, I think we'll be here for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, thanks for your time this morning, guys.